The Great Pyramid was finished before Stonehenge was built. While Britain was still in the Stone Age, Egypt had already built the tallest thing on earth, and it stayed the tallest for nearly 4,000 years. When Queen Cleopatra looked at the Great Pyramid, it was already 2,500 years old. But she was not looking at the remains of a vanished civilization. People still worshipped the same divinities. The old rites were still performed in working temples. The writing the builders had used could still be read. Picture Britain if the world that cut the Uffington white horse into the chalk were still alive. The monarch would speak the language of the people who made it, a language 3,000 years old, still living. The white horse would be no mystery. Any child could tell you what it meant and who made it and why. That is what Egypt achieved. Nowhere else in history has this happened. How Egypt did it is the real story. Around 1400 BC, the pharaoh Thutmose IV fell asleep in the shadow of the Sphinx. By then the Sphinx was already buried up to its neck in sand. He dreamed it spoke to him. It asked to be uncovered. He cleared the sand, and he set a stone tablet between its paws to say that he had. When Thutmose had that dream, the Sphinx was already more than 1,000 years old, an antiquity even to him. A century and a half later, an Egyptian prince walked to the old burial grounds at Saqqara. He found the crumbling pyramids of kings who had died 1,000 years before him. He restored them and carved each king's name back on so it would not be lost. He was the first Egyptologist. Egypt was old enough to have its own archaeology. Yet the artist was still drawing the human figure by the same rules, the same proportions, the same poses, fixed at the very beginning. England has had a monarchy for around 1,000 years, yet the English spoken at its beginning is a foreign language to us now. Egypt lasted 3,000 years, same language, same divinities, same forms. How did Egypt keep its world alive for 3,000 years? The Egyptians were not failing to change, they were refusing to. To the Egyptians, an image was not decoration. It was a form through which an eternal truth became present. Change of form, and you did not invent a new style. You broke a working instrument. The whole civilization was built the same way. The temple rites did not remember the order of the world. They renewed it every day. The pharaoh's first duty was not conquest, and it was not growth. It was to keep Maat, the right order of things, standing upright. Even when the kingdom broke, Egypt did not begin again. It reached back to the original forms and set the pattern straight, like a pillar that had tilted. The past was not behind them, shrinking from view. It was beneath them, holding everything up. To modernize, that looks like standing still. But that judgment hides an assumption that change is progress and a society must uproot itself to move forward. Egypt had something else to measure with. The true forms were given at the beginning. The measure of a generation was what it kept intact and what it handed on. Permanence was not the absence of achievement. Permanence was the achievement, the hardest one there is. Egypt set out to hold its form and held it for 3,000 years. Egypt was not strange in its aim. China measured rulers against the ancient pattern. Rome called it the way of the ancestors. Guard the origin, hold the true form, hand the world on intact. Egypt simply did it best. Medieval Arab travellers, standing in the shadow of the Sphinx, left a proverb: "Man fears time, but time fears the pyramids." The builders would have understood it perfectly, and 2,500 years later, Cleopatra still stood inside the world that they had built. Stand at Stonehenge, and you stand outside it. What it meant is gone. Whoever its builders were, we are not their people anymore. We cannot even say their names. Every civilization once worked to stop this happening. If holding on is what civilizations do, what is ours doing? We treat unchanging as an oddity and change as normal, as though human beings had always thought this way. They had not. This way of thinking is barely 150 years old. Until Darwin's century, every civilization on Earth placed its golden age in the past. Then the direction flipped. The golden age moved into the future. Old came to mean obsolete, and within a few generations we forgot anyone had ever thought otherwise. Civilizations have always lost things, but losing the past used to be a wound. They fought it, as Egypt did, clearing the sand and restoring the names for 3,000 years. Ours is the first that stopped fighting. We let things go on purpose and we call it moving on. Grandparents and grandchildren now grow up in different worlds. Nothing is handed on whole, because handing things on whole is the one skill we no longer practice. Egypt held its form for 3,000 years. Our world is barely 150 years old. It is coming apart in our hands, and we call it progress.